Hello everyone, this is a video entitled, as you know, How the Beatles Spoiled Me. And when I say that, I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way, though some people would beg to differ, I'm sure. And I guess it all starts really when I really first got into the Beatles. According to my mother, I was into the Beatles as of 3 years old. And I remember definitely watching Beatles, the cartoon series, on television. And that was probably when I was 4 or 5 years old. And that's probably my main introduction. And of course, I had Beatles items all around the house. I had records that were bought for me. And from an early age, I realized the greatness of the Beatles. Regardless of how you feel about them, we know that they have some really good music and that they kind of impacted everybody who came after them and made a mark on the world. Now, I got spoiled in a good way for a number of reasons. First reason is because of the music. Every song, I would say, I venture a lot of Beatles fans would say, ranges from being a great song or potential classic song to just a good song. Or at the worst, even the lesser tracks on their albums and B-sides of their singles would probably be called at least pretty good. At the worst, their least songs would be pretty good even. And that's kind of the main point that I want to really drive home here, is that I came to like all of their albums, all of their singles, and when I listen to an album, every song on there, as I say, is listenable. Now, let's get this out of the way right from the beginning, because a lot of people would easily bring up tracks that are considered lowest tier, the lower tier for the Beatles. And those are songs like Revolution 9, which is basically not a song, but just a bunch of tape loops and experimental silliness and craziness. And even that, I would argue, kind of serves a purpose on the Beatles' White Album, because the White Album is a double record set, very diverse. It has all kinds of things ranging from ballads to rock and roll to possibly the birth of heavy metal with Helter Skelter, country sounds, and even, yes, experimental avant-garde, everything. So, while I'm not going to call Revolution 9 a great or even a good song, not even a song, it has its purpose. And then, of course, there are easy targets like Wild Honey Pie, Why Don't We Do It in the Road, Her Majesty, which is only 20 some odd seconds long, and Maggie May, the short little snippet of Dig It from Let It Be. But the question is, are these really full-blown songs, or are these really just patches of songs, ideas that weren't finished? In the case of the songs on the White Album, like Wild Honey Pie and Why Don't We Do It in the Road, to me, they're just little breaks in between the proper songs, They kind of segue into the real songs. And even there, I have a charm for them. I enjoy them for what they are. But that's the dynamic here that's really in play, is that for me, the Beatles songs, Beatles albums, were all good, ranging from good to great, or pretty good. I don't know any other artist, group or solo, I mean, there's maybe some exceptions, where their entire catalog is that consistent. Say what you will about the Beatles, but their catalog is uncannily consistent and worthwhile. And that's why it's so difficult for me to listen to many other artists. Now, there are other artists that I like besides the Beatles, but to me, aside from a few of them, the Beatles are where it begins and ends. Now, I've got all kinds of one-hit wonders in my collection. I got 45's albums. I got some people that have many hits. I got some that have no hits. And I want to emphasize also at this time that it's not just songs that are hits that I like. Some songs that I love in life were never hits, never made the charts even. So it's not just about having a big hit on the charts. People I like, examples of like songs that by people I like or artists I go for, people like Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan never really was a hits-making artist. And I like a lot of Bob Dylan material that's not hits at all. I mean, I love the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, the entire album all the way through. I enjoy Infidels, the Bob Dylan album all the way through, Highway 61 Revisited, and so on, from start to finish, bringing it all back home. Not every song on these albums is a hit or commercial. So although I have no shame in saying over and over again that I thoroughly enjoy mainstream music, I thoroughly enjoy commercial music, at least commercial music from the 1950s through the 80s. Let's not talk about today's commercial pop music, which is just crap, in my opinion, today. But let's go back to, I guess, my younger sister at the time. When I was about 15, my younger sister would listen to all kinds of what was current. A lot of disco was big in the 70s, and I remember her listening to an album you may have heard of, classic called Fleetwood Mac's Rumors album. And the Rumors album has an amazing distinction for me in that Rumors is the first non-Beatles album that I ever heard, and I heard it through my sister playing it in her room. It was the first non-Beatles album I ever heard where I said, hey, I like every song on this album. Every song on this album is either great, very good, good, or at the very least, pretty good. There's not a dog on this album. And that's the first time that I realized, there's life after the Beatles. And of course, since then, I've liked other albums, as I say, by artists in their entirety. Now, let me just name a couple just to prove to you what I'm talking about. Like Harvest, Neil Young. I like the entire Harvest album by Neil Young. That was another album that proved to me that, there's other albums that are consistent. Of course, it's not just Beatles albums, but the Beatles corner the market for the most part on albums that are listenable and enjoyable start to finish almost consistently every album. So in addition to that, we have artists like Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. Joan Jett and the Blackhearts have their share of modest hits. I like Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, all their albums all the way through. I can listen to Joan Jett basically because I like her style, I like her rockin' edge, I like her voice, I like the toughness and the way rock music is in her genes, in her blood, and she really lives and breathes it to the point where I can listen to every single album by Joan Jett all the way through and enjoy them thoroughly. There was an album that came out, I talk about this quite frequently. It came out, I think, in 2015. It's about 3 years old, maybe. It's an album by a newer artist, a young woman called Elle King, and some people pronounce it Ellie King, but I think I heard her say Elle, so that's why I'm saying Elle. But an album called Love Stuff. I heard a couple of tunes off it, thought it was a really good album. Well, the two songs were good, I should say. I was kind of lured into investigating the rest of the album, and I discovered I loved that album from start to finish. That's so rare for me, too. So I'm trying to say that there are occasions where there are albums I like all the way through. Another one I might say is from 1979, Blondie. I love their album Eat to the Beat. Absolutely adore that album all the way through. Every track on there is a winner. I can listen to it straight through and love it. I also like the 1984 album She's So Unusual by Cyndi Lauper. I think that album is consistent all through, even the songs that were not hits on there, even though that album has a handful of hits in itself. I can listen to these. But the Beatles really soured me on other people, because 9 times out of 10, aside from some of these exceptions that I've been talking about, the rule is that 9 out of 10 times for me, when I put on an album, you got 1 or 2 popular tracks, and the rest is what they call filler. And that's why I find it very difficult sometimes to get into listening to entire albums by other artists. Recently, I've gotten into Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash, I really love the man's voice. I love the way the guitars are played on his music. And the style that he has, it commands the song to the point where it's so intense, his vocals are so commanding that I actually can listen to any song and enjoy any song. So while I haven't listened to a lot of Johnny Cash albums in full yet, I'm just starting, I might be able to appreciate the man's albums all the way through. If I like a person's singing, if I like a person's style, if I like the person as a personality, if I'm interested in them as a person, I want to hear what they have to say, I may listen to albums all the way through. But getting back to the purposes of the video, how I was spoiled, people are always, suggesting things to me. I'll never forget when somebody once said to me, hey, why don't you listen to, and I might say the name of this newer artist wrong, Tame Impala or Tam Impala? I don't know. They sound just like the Beatles. Well, they don't sound like the Beatles to me. I've heard some tracks. Somebody singing in a Lennon-esque nasally pitch, and singing like this doesn't necessarily mean it's not like the Beatles or whatever to me. So sounds like Ralph Cramden. Rachel, you've come back, a string of Peloponnese. It's the Beatles. No, it doesn't do it for me. And let's take a group like the 60s group, The Seeds. I like the Seeds song. They got a big hit, or they had a hit called Pushing Too Hard. I don't even know if it was a chart hit or not, but it's a popular song by them. And I love that song, Pushing Too Hard, but I have an album by the Seeds, and I don't really play it. But do I really want to hear a whole album by them? Who knows? Maybe I'll like it if I give it a shot. More often than not, and more likely than not, it's going to be just that one song that's really interesting, and the rest are going to be just album filler. It's not just, when it comes back to the Beatles, it's not just the music I like, which, as I say, is kind of pop mainstream, and for the most part, and I'm not ashamed of that, as I said earlier, because the marks of a good song to me are if it sticks in your head. I like an interesting hook, a catchy chorus, a tune that you can whistle along with the tune, you can hum along with the tune. You're walking and you find yourself humming that in your brain even though you haven't heard the song in a while. It sticks with you. That's what a song is. A song is music. It's a tune. But with the Beatles, it wasn't just the music that I was interested. I was also interested in their history. I was also interested in them as four individuals. I like all four Beatles as human beings. I like all four Beatles as interesting people. So when I listen to the Beatles music, it's not just the music that I'm digging. I'm also kind of enraptured with their entire aura, the aura about them, their history. It's worth listening to the Beatles music because their history is so exciting and they've accomplished so much. I remember somebody saying, hey, I just listened to Soft Machine. Soft Machine? I'd never heard of Soft Machine. These names that I'll just throw out, just some names at the top of my head. Uriah Heep. I don't know Uriah Heep. Joy Division. Are they good? Perhaps. But if you ask me if I'm interested in investing a lot of time and effort and stuff into their music, why? Part of the reasons why the Beatles spoiled me are because, as I say, they're important. They're music 101. When you go to school, if you have a music teaching class, a history professor of the arts, entertainment, popular culture, he's going to talk about the Beatles. You're going to study Eleanor Rigby. That's what you're going to study. You're going to talk about I Am the Walrus. You're not going to talk about a song from, I can think of any one of the names. Nectar. I'm just thinking of titles. Not going to be talking much about King Crimson, Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, don't put my music down. How do you know? Why don't you try it? And I may well indeed like it. I may try it, I like it. Lord knows I've tried music I didn't think I would like, and I have liked it. But my whole thing is, why even take the effort? Life is short, and to me, to invest in artists where 9 out of 10 times you're just going to like one song or two songs, for me, doesn't always seem worth it. Though at times it can be beneficial. You can actually get a good payoff if you wind up appreciating somebody that you hadn't thought you would. There's books out. How many books do they have on Elvis Presley? How many books do they have on the Beatles? They have thousands of books on the Beatles. And why? Because it's worth the history. It's worth learning. It's worth knowing. They're important. They're not just music. They shaped a generation. They shaped the world. These days, young people, as you can see on YouTube making videos, are still into the Beatles. And they still love them. They're still, amazed by them. There's something about them. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band last year, the 50th anniversary in 2017, went to the top of the charts. The one album in the decade of the 2000s, the one album of all the Beatles' number one hits, it's the biggest selling album for that decade. The Beatles had broken up 30 years before that album was even released. How does that become a number one song of the 2000, number one album, I should say, of the 2000s? How does that happen? Happens because they're worth listening to. Happens because they're worth knowing. Happens because they're timeless and important. That's why it's so hard for me to invest a lot of energy in books and things about people that are not that crucial. I mean, sometimes I'll talk to somebody and I may say, they did so many takes of Strawberry Fields Forever. They took, George Martin took one version and kind of slowed one down and changed the tempo and mixed it together to make a song. Somebody will say, who cares? Who cares? Everybody cares. The world should care. Why? Because it's a landmark classic, Strawberry Fields Forever. It's the Beatles. I'm not really interested. I don't think it's important. And excuse me for being a snob about this, but I don't think I have to buy a book on the Soft Machine recording session chronicles. I mean, Soft Machine may be liked by somebody, but you don't have to buy a book and find out, recording in Studio 3, sessions from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m., tracks 3, 4, 5. It doesn't matter, the history. It's Soft Machine. You may like the music, you may enjoy it. I'm not taking that from you, but is it really that important? Is it really that vital? That's the kind of thing I mean, and it's impossible sometimes to talk about this stuff without offending people, and that's not my intent, although it's inevitable, I suppose. But it's just not something worth investigating. To me, Johnny Cash, that I'm getting into now, it's worth investigating. It's Johnny Cash. The classic Johnny Cash, the Man in Black. Elvis Presley, the great Elvis. I mean, these are people that are worth investigating. Bob Dylan. And my tastes go all over the map. I mean, I also like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And there's a lot of times where I like a lot of his non-popular hit songs, too. So it's not just always about the hits with me, although a lot of times it is, because I was brought up and spoiled by the Beatles. Well, folks, this kind of was all over the place. I think I made my points of what I wanted to say. The Beatles raised the bar very high, and in my life especially, and it's very, very difficult to settle for anything less than the best, or to get so involved, I should say, is more like what I want to say, with anything that's less than the best. I've got plenty of records in my collection by people that are not the best. I'm never going to try to claim that, even though I love Joan Jett, that she's anywhere near in the same league as a Paul McCartney or a John Lennon. No. I'm not going to claim that because I like the Monkees. The Monkees are the greatest thing in the world. Peace out.